I'm so scared.
Do you need help?
She finally let me go.
Welcome back to the Paranormal Paranoids. Today we're taking our first foray into the abandoned town of Shelby Oaks.
I've been searching for Riley for the last 12 years. I know my sister's not dead.
Bodies were found outside of Shelby Oaks. Riley Brennan is still missing.
The last night I saw her, she said she saw a man standing in her window, staring at her. Yeah. You live alone out here? Nope. Where is my sister? Riley.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Fresh Cuts. We are recording on Halloween Eve. I hope everyone is excited for the holiday. Joining me, as always, it's Mr. Venom. What's up, Venom?
Greetings and salutations, paranormal investigators. Yeah, I'm doing all right. I kind of wish I was investigating some paranormal locations myself, but instead I'm stuck here talking to these two guys.
All right, also with us, it's Dawn and Ellie. What's up, Dawn?
Yeah, welcome back. Glad to be here finally. So, yeah, for those that missed my absence on the last week, I had a slight accident at work. I was in the storeroom, the store catalog, warehouse, and putting stuff away. And one of my coworkers asked for something on the top shelf, and since I'm a little taller, I had to reach for it and grab it. Well, when I go to pull the box away, whatever reason, the paneling wore off, the thing broke away, whatever. But I just give it a slight tug, and all of a sudden, everything just falls flat on my face. And I put my hand up to block it because I've already got it there, but it's all at such an odd angle because it falls out that it bends me backwards at such an odd angle that I feel like my back jerk. And, you know, didn't think much of it that day. Come the weekend, I was really struggling. And essentially, the day that we were going to record Fresh Cuts, I woke up and my back was an absolute mess. I was basically using a walker to go to the bathroom, and it's only like 5 feet away from my bedroom. Like that's how bad my back was. Like you could what I ended up having to go to the hospital just because there was a point where I could feel a discharge in my back. I could feel like one of my neural spines like charging, and it would send out this pulse up and down my back, and it would basically just like completely cripple me. And like I couldn't record in that space. There was nothing I could do to make the show, so I missed Black Phone 2. I know nothing about it. I didn't get a chance to see it, so don't ask me my thoughts for it. Um, Basically, this is like the third or fourth day that I've been off painkillers. I still have a heating pad on at the moment, but I'm mobile enough at least to at least move around and record tonight's show. So don't know if that was warranted. Don't know if anybody cared, but for the two of you that do, that was my explanation for missing last week's show. So yeah, yes, back to you, Mike.
All right. Well, glad to have you back. Um, I think at least the one show you missed, it was a best case scenario because it was a movie me and Venom both enjoyed, so we didn't really have a tough time talking about it. So, um,
Yeah, I at least heard it, but I have not seen the film. So like I said, that's why I was gonna say, like, don't ask me about it because I still haven't seen it. I heard the show and it sounds like something I'd like, but we'll see if I whenever I get a chance to it. So you guys made it sound interesting because you guys are probably the highest I've heard. Everybody seems to call it just a bland nightmare knockoff. I don't know if that's the general consensus because I haven't seen it. From what it sounds like, I think you guys are probably the highest, but like I said, I haven't seen it, so we'll see.
yeah, I kind of feel like from what I've read around is if you like the first one, you'll like the second one, but then within that group of people, it's kind of split between which one you think is better. So, um, from what I read, I mean, I kind of after we did the show, I kind of like faded off on like following reviews. That was more of a before we recorded on it, but because I think it does extend some concepts from the first one into it, but to me the second one does have kind of like a different feel, which is kind of why I preferred it over the first one. But they're generally in the same ballpark to me, I think. But anyways, that's our mini redux on Black Phone 2, I guess. This week we are actually covering Shelby Oaks. So this one got a little bit of a little bit of buzz because I think it was like a YouTuber that made this. Maybe someone who I wasn't really familiar with him, but I think I had seen people talk about Chris Stuckman. Like I'm not sure if he was like a YouTuber in the sense that he did like horror movie reviews or a podcast or something, but I know like a couple weeks ago they were like doing early screenings, like not like a early release, but I think like actual like screenings with like specific invites for like industry people. So I mean, and I think the reviews might have still been embargoed, but it was just kind of like a way to generate some buzz, like, oh look, this movie's getting some early screens. But anyways, this is I wouldn't even call it found footage. It kind of starts like it's going to be like a found footage movie, but I'll I should just stop there. I'll get into the synopsis and then we can actually start talking. So, Shelby Oaks, a woman's desperate search for her long lost sister falls into obsession upon realizing that the imaginary demon from their childhood may have been real. Ooh, okay. So, general thoughts on Shelby Oaks, Venom, go.
All right. Well, just to give a little bit of background, I'm sure some people have heard me talk about Chris Stuckman in the past. I have been a loyal follower of Chris Stuckman for, I would probably say, 6 or 7 years now. I've been watching his channel. He is a movie reviewer, not just a horror movie reviewer, just all around. He definitely is a horror fan, and every October he does a horror review every day. So obviously, we're at the end of October, so he's done one every day in October. Usually it's classic movies, but obviously when a new horror film comes out, he'll go ahead and do that one. I've always found myself agreeing with Chris on a lot of his opinions, which is probably why I've always said he is my favorite movie reviewer out there. For the most part, he's very intelligent. Even when I disagree with him, he still brings good reinforcement for his opinion, and I can always respect that. I have no problem disagreeing with people, but when they bring their arguments with that much intelligence and class, I generally will still respect them. So yeah, Chris Stuckman has been my favorite YouTube movie reviewer for a very long time now. So what did I think of the movie? Well, well, friends, unfortunately, I have to report that I am not the biggest fan of this film. I, of course, am a huge found footage fan, and anybody who's listened to the show, for any amount of time knows I don't watch trailers. I haven't watched a horror movie trailer in probably about 7 or 8 years now. I want to go in as fresh as possible, as blind as possible. But going into this, I had been told by many people that it is a found footage movie, which excited me because I absolutely adore found footage. It's probably a top 3 subgenre of horror for me, next to supernatural and zombies. I love, love, love found footage. I'll even watch the bad ones. I always find something of quality, even in the bad found footage movies. Well, friends, this movie is solidly not found footage. The first act of the film is, and that's where I was the most on board with this film. Our movie opens up more like a mockumentary style, where you've got a news crew interviewing a sister of someone who has gone missing, who has now been missing for 12 years. And there is a catalyst event that occurs very shortly after the opening credits, which then leads to the found footage aspect of the film. And that's where I was the most on board for this. I thought that Chris put together a decent little mystery to start. Another reason that I probably was so on board is because I am a big fan of ghost hunting shows and YouTube channels. I watch all the ghost hunting shows. I watch probably like 4 or 5 different ghost hunting YouTube channels. It's just something that I really enjoy. I don't necessarily call myself a believer in the paranormal so much as I'm receptive to it. I'm open to it. I've never experienced anything paranormal myself, but because I enjoy both horror films and ghost hunting stuff, I've always considered myself open to it if I were to ever run into it. But back to the movie. Once it leaves that found footage aspect and it goes to a full production narrative film, I feel like the movie slows down drastically. Like, I actually found myself, I hate to say it because of how much of a fan I am of Chris Stuckman, but I found myself bored in the second act. Like, once the sister starts her investigation and the movie solidly leaves found footage in the dust, I just kind of found the pacing to be a lot slower. Maybe the characters to not be nearly as engaging as I'd hoped they would be. I will say that Camille Sullivan as Mia is the absolute MVP of this movie. Great performance by her. Maybe some questionable judgment, which has kind of been brought up in other reviews that I've listened to. Nothing that I really had too much of a personal issue with, but it seems like a lot of other reviewers did. So I'll point those out later during the walkthrough. But overall, like I said, just the second act just left me kind of bored. And then the third act, once the shit hits the fan and we actually start to get more reveals of what's actually happening, I started to get on board again, but then the ending happens, and I do not like the ending of this film. Not just the way that the story ends, but the fact that we are left kind of in the dark on the fate of some of the people in Riley's paranormal investigative group, which I actually thought that it was kind of a cool name, Paranormal Paranoids, which actually for the last 2 years, Chris Stuckman has been making paranormal paranoid shorts on YouTube, just kind of trying to build up the lore and the world building of Shelby Oaks, which I was kind of on board for. But like I said, folks, the film isn't bad. Now, where the film is an absolute triumph is in its filmmaking. Like, this does not look like a movie made by a YouTuber. This looks like a movie made by, a legitimate, long time working horror director, somebody like a Mike Flanagan, who actually is an executive producer on this film, which was one of the reasons I was very excited to see this one. Anything with Mike Flanagan's name on it, I'm usually excited to see. But this one, like I said, it just kind of left me wanting more from both the story, the action, definitely the gore. Not a whole lot of on-screen gore in this one. We get a little bit, some decent little bits of blood here and there, but for the most part, the movie leaves us lacking certain information about the fate. I mean, we know the fates of the people in Riley's group, but I want to see what the hell happened to him. Like, legitimately what happened to him. Not still shots, not blurred out, aftermath shots. No, I want to know. I want to see it. If there's footage of it, then we should get to see it. And in the world of the film, there actually is footage of it, because they actually show a newsreel towards the end of the film where the newscaster actually says, okay, we're about to show you the footage of what happened to Riley and her friends. But then we don't get it. We never actually get to see it. So again, it left us a little bit in the dark on, what happened to certain characters in the movie. The ending of the story just kind of left me just very lackluster. Like, I really wanted to see a lot more from this one. I will say this is a good debut. I hope that Chris continues making movies. I mean, considering the backlash that he's getting from other YouTube movie reviewers, he may not want to. A lot of people just don't seem to like this movie, and maybe it's because they don't like Chris Stuckman in general. Obviously, when somebody's a popular YouTuber, he's always going to have haters. That's just the way life goes. So maybe this is a case of the haters over hating on his film. But I'm going to say the movie is okay. It's a solid debut, but it definitely leaves a lot to be desired. I would like to see Chris direct a movie that he doesn't write himself, because that's the weakness of this film, is in its screenwriting. The story starts out solid, but just kind of flounders towards the end. And then by the time we get to the third act, it's just a lot of been there, done that. A lot of the gags that we see on the film, we've seen them before. We've seen them done better. And we've definitely seen more satisfying endings to a story like this. So I'm just going to say that this is an average film. It looks beautiful. It's got good sound design. The score is serviceable. The acting is okay. I'm not going to say it's exceptional by any stretch of the imagination. It's passable. But like I said, Camille Sullivan as Mia does a great job. Like, I was on board with her character. By the time we get to the end of the movie, I kind of am not on board with her character anymore because of certain decisions that she makes right there at the end. But I'll leave it at that for now. And I'll say this is a serviceable debut. I would like to see Chris continue. Hopefully, all of the bad press that he's getting isn't going to deter him from continuing to live his dream. Because, like I said, I've been watching this guy for, 6-7 years, and he's always talked about the dream of making a film. And about 2 years ago, when the project got greenlit, he was very excited. About a year ago, when Mike Flanagan's name was attached to the project, again, the excitement level kind of peaked. But unfortunately, maybe my expectations were a little bit too much, or I just really wanted this movie to be good because I'm such a fan of Chris Stuckman, and it just kind of left me wanting a little bit more, especially coming from a found footage lover. And finding out that this movie is really only found footage for one act, it just kind of left me a little sour. So I'll just leave it at that and say that Shelby Oaks is a decent debut, but it definitely left a lot to be desired. So back to you, Mike.
All right. How about you, Don?
Well, I hate to come back and pretty much not contribute much, but I'm pretty much in lockstep with Venom. Yeah, I'd heard of the guy. I can't say I'm a huge fan of his style. Um, I've maybe seen a couple of his clips, but I don't really tend to do movie reviews on YouTube. I'm much more of a reaction channel guy. That's kind of more where I am with this, but um, I had heard of him. I had probably seen a couple of his over the course of the past couple of years, but either way, yeah, the best thing I can say about this is it's watchable, but it doesn't really rise above that. I love the idea for this. I think the premise is really solid. Not necessarily in the same sense, but I do kind of get a little bit of uh damn, where was I going with this? That Australian mockumentary that came out. Oh, damn it. What's that thing called? The one where they disappear, the girl disappears and it figures it's fake, but then it turns out to be real.
Not Grave
Um,
Encounters, right?
no, it's, like I said, it's Australian. It's a little earlier than
Right.
that.
Ah.
Yeah, everybody seems to love it, but I think it's absolute ass. Yeah, it's just a little earlier. It's like maybe mid 2000s. Thing's gonna bug the hell out of me, but um, yeah, I don't remember why. It starts with an L for some reason. That's all I can think of. I'll come back to that later, but it kind of reminds me a little bit of that, where it has a central mystery that's actually really engrossing, and I really do like the found footage in the first half, where it kind of looks into what happened to her and how she disappeared, and like it gets the investigation going. But yeah, once it drops the found footage and it just becomes a regular film, this thing just moves like molasses. It is slow, and it doesn't become as interesting as it thinks it is. And a lot of the different reveals that we get there don't really tie together. Like I had a hard time trying to piece all the stories together, and it kind of just leaves the whole middle section just feeling drawn out and a lot longer than it really is. Now, like I said, it does pick up a little bit in the third act, where you start getting even more revelations, and it finally starts putting the second half investigation pieces together. But yeah, I don't really care for the ending either. I think there's a solid idea in concept, but it just doesn't come together in the execution of it. And maybe it was, somebody that had a little bit more experience behind the camera who could have pulled it together. But with a first time filmmaker, it definitely shows, and it just feels a little clumsy and awkward. And the idea just, the best thing you can is like what Venom said, where it just leaves you feeling like you missed something, like you're wanting a little bit more from it. And I don't know if like I said, if I should chalk that up to his inexperience, or if, the idea was there, but it just doesn't come together on screen. And I wanna like it more than I do, but it's just not as good as everybody says it is. Like I said, the middle section is just so slow, and it just drags on forever. And as much as the idea is worthwhile, I like the way that it sets up her disappearance. I like the way we start looking into this. It's, kind of like the cold case kind of a thing, where everybody comes together and it starts looking into it years later and start piecing together what happened. I like that aspect of it, but yeah, I don't know if it should have stuck with the found footage, or if it should have just been a regular film from the beginning, and maybe just use bits and pieces of this to sort of set up the mystery, like whether filming it in one version over the other for the entire duration, instead of sticking with the two different sections for the way that it did. I don't know if that does a disservice, but yeah, either way, it's a little bit of a missed opportunity. It's okay for what it is. There's some creepy moments here and there. A lot of it's in the third act, when we finally start getting an idea of what's going on, and the second half doesn't have a lot of cogent um, storytelling ideas, but when they finally start coming together in the third act, it finally starts getting a little bit better. But yeah, overall, it's a little bit of a missed opportunity. It's okay for what it is. I can see some, not really minding the slow second act. I can see some really enjoying it, but yeah, either way, it's a little down from where I wanted it to be because I do really like the premise. I do really like the first act. I like the way it sets everything up, but either way, it kind of just leaves a little bit of a sour lasting impression, especially with the way it ends. So, um, trying to think if there's anything else, and yeah, nothing's really coming to me. I'll try to look up what that other damn movie is. Like I
I
said,
believe the movie you were thinking of is Lake Mungo.
Lake Mungo. Damn it, that's the one. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, Lake Mungo. That's the one. Yeah. For some reason, I was thinking Lake House, and like that wasn't right. But yeah, like I said, since I figured that one out, I guess back to you, Mike.
Okay. So for me, Shelby Oaks, I'm kind of there with you guys. I I liked it to a certain degree, but I also feel that it kind of ended up just being a little basic, a little thin, a little I've seen this kind of premise so many times before. Like if this movie would have come out 10 to 15 years ago, I probably would have felt, oh, look, it's a little bit more fresh of an idea, the way the story goes. I also was a little, I guess disappointed is the right word because it definitely starts out as like a ghost hunter's premise, but then once it kind of gets where it's going, it kind of switches. Because I mean, I know a demon is, I mean, I guess you could technically throw that all in the same bin of supernatural thing, but it seemed like it was going to be more like ghost hunters encounter like something and once it shifted, that to me is where it became a very standard story and you kind of knew where it was going to go from that point. I also like I think Venom criticized the end. I also am I don't know if confused is the right word, but we learned something at the end about like, oh, all along it was actually this, and I'm like, but that kind of doesn't make sense because if that was the plan all along, it seems like they the plan was made more difficult, like for no reason. Because it's like, well, why didn't you just go after what you were trying to go after in the first place instead of like this other plan to get to this? And obviously vague until we get to spoilers, but I will give positives. Like it didn't look like a filmed by like someone for the first time. Like it did look pretty good. Like I was like surprised about that. Like it looked like a legitimate, well made like a production. It was good. Um, Again, like I wouldn't call the story like bad. It's just that it's very familiar. It's just something that like after we get like a setup where it can go kind of any direction about like what a half hour in, it's like this could go anywhere. It's not really solidified what we're gonna get from this part. And then I guess like Venom said, once the sister kind of takes over her investigation, everything that unfolds is like, oh, okay, so it's a pretty like familiar story about this. And now that's not to say there weren't some creepy moments. Like there's a character we get introduced, like I think what maybe three-quarters of the way through that I thought was kind of cool in a creepy way. There's some like nice shots of that. So I see it's kind of if I can put it in the way like I see the ability there, like the potential in this director writer if he keeps progressing. But I would say like for anyone who hasn't seen this yet, just go into this like very much expecting like kind of like the smaller, I guess, thinner type of story you're gonna get if it's like one person working on the writing and all that themselves. And yeah, it's understandable because they're probably working based on like stuff they've seen, like how most of us would probably do like a first time movie. So you're going to be drawing a lot of things that are familiar to your own zeitgeist, and it's going to probably end up, without like the money to get like editors and people doing like script edits and going, 'cause, what all the major productions do to get a finished product. It's not surprising that it came out kind of familiar, but I still like enjoyed it on some level. Like I didn't leave the theater like, oh my God, that sucked or anything. Like I was like, okay, it's good, but like, yeah, the hype was a little much for what it ended up being, but I would call it fine. It's fine. I wasn't, I guess I say I'm not disappointed because I really didn't have expectations going. I didn't really know much about it or the background of it. Um, but I also wasn't like super impressed. So it just kind of hit that middle ground of like, oh, okay. If I would have ended up seeing this on Shutter instead of the theater, I wouldn't be like disappointed I didn't see it in the theater, other than like the mantra of support horror when it goes to the theater. But this kind of feels like a movie where if you randomly discovered it on VOD, having knowing nothing about it, having never heard of it, you'd be like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like I'm gonna tell other people about it. It kind of feels like one of those discoveries, because we all know how many of these type of films end up on VOD with like no recognition beforehand. They just kind of show up on Prime or Tubi or even Shutter, and it's like, what's this? I'm going to randomly discover it. But yeah, so I would say there's potential. There's elements there that are good, and I'm am interested and curious to see what he does next because I hope he has more ideas and keeps going. Um, but yeah, it has the feel very much so of like someone's first movie. So I'll leave it at that. Back to you, Venom.
Yeah, it kind of disappoints me to, have to say so many negative things about the movie. Like I said, I am a fan of the man. And I want him to continue to make movies. I just maybe direct a different screenwriter's movie next time. Like I'd like to see his directing chops just as a director. Sometimes, when you're the writer, producer, director, when you wear all the hats for a movie, it's almost like, oof, how can I put this into words? Maybe they're like overreaching, over trying, especially on a debut. Like maybe this movie didn't need to be as big as it was. As far as scope goes, of course, I'm not talking about the theatrical release or anything like that. But yeah, it's really too bad. Like I said, I mean, you tell me that a found footage movie is coming out in theaters, I get excited. And then when I get to the theater and 25 minutes into it, it's no longer a found footage movie. Yes, inherently that's going to be a little bit disappointing for me. So sadly, yeah. Not a whole lot I can really add to the conversation already. It seems like all three of us are kind of right there in the same place, wishing that the movie gave us a little bit more, that there wasn't as much just been there, done that as there was. And yeah, that ending. Um, I'm curious to find out what Mike's confusion about the ending was because I don't know. For me, it felt kind of cut and dry, but that's just me. Maybe I experienced it a little bit differently than he did, but the point being that I wanted to like this movie a lot more, not just because of its concept, but just because of the person behind it. Because I've been following this story, the story of this film for almost 2 years now. It's definitely something that I wished I could praise a little bit more, but unfortunately I cannot. And I'm trying to be as diplomatic as I can because I'm not going to shit on another filmmaker's movie. I mean, the movie's not garbage, I mean, objectively, this isn't a bad movie. It's going to leave a lot of people wanting more. I mean, I have seen some positive reviews for the film too. So again, hopefully those aren't just, personal acquaintances of Chris Stuckman that are kind of over pumping the movie. I'd like to think that if you say you like the movie, that you legitimately did like it. There is a lot to like here. There really is. but there's also a little bit too much ambiguity and a little bit too much weird decision making. And like I said, the abandonment of the found footage aspect just really hit me hard. For a lot of other people who maybe aren't as big a fans as of the found footage subgenre, they probably like that it abandons it at the end of the first act, and nothing wrong with that. You know, if you're more a fan of the full production narrative film, then fine, there's nothing wrong with that. But I really would have liked to have seen this thing be found footage the whole movie. Maybe not found footage, but like that mockumentary style. Like make the anchor of this film not be the sister's investigation into her missing sister. Let it be more the news broadcast, the interview, and then pepper it with found footage in between interview footage and things like that. I don't know. I don't want to sit here and second guess what Chris Stuckman did, because ultimately all I can really speak to is how much enjoyment I got out of the movie. And for the most part, the majority of the enjoyment I derived from this film was from the first act. The second act, just like I said, I almost fell asleep, and that's not even an exaggeration. I did almost fall asleep in the theater during the second act of this film. Most of the time when I go to the theater, the AC is turned up too high. But this time I went to a new AMC, one that I had never been to before, and apparently, you know, they value warmth there a little bit more than AC. And yeah, when I get warm and bored, I start to fall asleep. So, you know, sorry, Chris Stuckman, I love you to death, but yeah, your movie almost made me fall asleep. So I guess I'll turn it over to my co-host to see if they have anything else to say about it before we get into the walkthrough. But otherwise, this will be your final spoiler warning. If you haven't seen Shelby Oaks and are still interested in seeing it, then go ahead and pause the show and rejoin us after you see it. Otherwise, if you've already seen it or don't care to, stick around for our walkthrough. But yeah, like I said, let me turn it over to my co-host to see if they have any additional non-spoiler points to make before we get into the walkthrough. So, gentlemen, I turn it over to you.
Nope.
I was about to say the silence is speaking volumes.
I just kept misclicking on my mute button. It wasn't unmuting.
All right, then.
Yeah,
so let's
same
get
here.
Okay. Yeah. Like I said, as much as I want to defend Stuckman and the production, you know, I don't want to be a fanboy either. I don't want to be a blind fanboy who just, you know, because of how much I like him, I'm not going to praise the movie ultimately. I think I've given it all the praise that it deserves. So let's go ahead and just move on to our walkthrough. Our movie opens up with a news crew at a woman's house. They are interviewing her. We find out shortly after the beginning that this is the sister of a woman named Riley Brennan. She is the host of a YouTube channel, and this is early YouTube too, because don't forget, she's been missing for 12 years, which is something we find out a little bit into the film. So obviously this is very early YouTube, you know, this is before, you know, Good Mythical Morning and all the big YouTube channels that exist now. So we see that they are a team of four. They call themselves the Paranormal Paranoids. It is Riley, Laura, Peter, and David, though ultimately Laura, Peter, and David really just become side notes in this film, which is, like I said, one of the biggest disappointments for me personally. But the reason why is we find out early on that Riley is missing. Her body was never found, but the bodies of her three partners were found, and they were found in very bad shape. Like they had been brutally murdered. We see what do you call it? Censored pictures of the bodies, because obviously this is a news program and they're not going to show full X-rated pictures of dead bodies. But yeah, you can tell even through the mosaic that they got decimated pretty bad. Like there's a lot of blood in all three of the general areas of the dead bodies, but unfortunately, we never really find out exactly. I mean, we know what happened to them. Obviously, they're dead, and we know who did it. But you know, without actually seeing it, it's kind of like one of those things where, you know, if there's no video or picture, it didn't happen. And in my eyes, it kind of didn't happen because I never got to see it. So We find out that Riley's been missing for 12 years and that the sister is convinced that she is not dead. Obviously, lifelong sisters have that, connection, that almost psychic connection that many of us who don't have siblings will never understand. So she obviously is always Mia is the name of the sister, by the way. I don't know why the hell I've just been saying the sister. It is Mia, played by Camille Sullivan. Mia, like I said, is still, convinced that her sister is alive for the mere fact that they haven't found a body, and they did search the woods where the bodies of the other 3 investigators were found. And then we get our first catalyst event of the film. After the news crew is done with their interview, someone knocks at the door of Mia's house. And when she answers the door, there's a middle-aged man there. Basically, he says, "She finally let me go. She finally set me free." Then he pulls out a gun and unceremoniously blows his own brains out right in front of Riley on her porch, which I think we see in the trailer, if I remember correctly. So, you kind of know where we're going from there. The police then come, to take care of the body and, get a statement from Mia, everything else. After the police, by the way, did it bother anybody else that she was bloody for almost a full day afterwards? Like, wouldn't you wash someone else's blood off of you? Like that kind of bothered me. Like, literally, the suicide took place during the day. The sun is out, but then that night, deep into the night, Mia is still fucking covered in blood. And I'm like, really? You're not worried about diseases or germs? Or like, even the police didn't say, "Oh, you should probably go wash up now. That's somebody else's blood." And, we're not going to know until an autopsy is done whether he has any kind of weird diseases or anything. But no, I understand the sense of shock and everything else. And kind of that's what Chris was going for here. But it just doesn't make sense to me that somebody would have somebody else's blood on them for that long after a suicide. So, problem number 1 already with the movie. So anyway, after the police leave, we find out that Mia took a videotape off of the man. He had a small, like one of those small camcorder tapes in his hand. It was just labeled Shelby Oaks. By the way, we haven't talked about the town of Shelby Oaks yet. The town of Shelby Oaks is in Ohio, and it is a ghost town. It's a town that basically only had 2 things worth living there. One was an amusement park, and the other one was a prison. So, those were pretty much your 2 options of where to work if you lived in Shelby Oaks during the 60s, 70s, and 80s. In the late 90s, there was a string of accidents at the amusement park, and the amusement park ended up getting shut down. And then very shortly after that, the prison ended up getting shut down. And then we do get a cool cameo from Keith David. Those of you who are Keith David fans, I consider myself one also. He ends up being the former warden of that prison, and he talks a little bit about a prisoner there named Wilson. I forgot his last name, but basically he talks about how the day that Wilson was admitted into this prison, that the shit kind of hit the fan, that people started dying in the prison, and, weird, unexplainable things started happening. He doesn't give us any specific examples other than a prison riot that did happen, where during the prison riot, basically what happened was there was an electrical glitch, and all of the prison doors, all of the cell doors were connected to the same switch, master switch. There was a glitch in the system, and all the doors opened, all the cell doors opened. And of course, all the inmates are going to leave their cells and pretty much start havoc. Well, Wilson didn't leave his cell. He literally just stayed in his cell, staring out the window with a big ear-to-ear grin on his face as he was staring back into the direction of the amusement park at Shelby Oaks. And as it turns out, the guy who committed suicide is this person, Wilson. We find out later on after his suicide that he was he's born and raised in Shelby Oaks in the early 80s. He never left the town, ended up committing a couple of crimes, which of course ended up sending him to jail, to prison. And like I said, but there's all sorts of lore surrounding Wilson, like, just like what Keith David was saying, that as soon as Wilson was admitted into the prison, stuff started happening. Well, same thing with his birth. They basically say that right when he was born in the early 80s, the town of Shelby Oaks started going downhill. And then that's when some of these accidents at the amusement park started happening. Not to say that he was directly responsible, but obviously there is some kind of connection that we have to figure out. So
I was really hoping we would get more Keith David, because
yeah,
it was kind of like a nice surprise. I mean, maybe they had a one scene budget for him, like come in for an hour and do this scene. But once he was there, I was like, oh, especially because I think there was a couple more scenes at the prison. So I was like, oh, maybe Keith David will get like another scene.
Exactly. I felt the same way about Larry Fessenden and Good Boy, except Good Boy was actually a good movie. And I would have liked to have seen more of Fessenden because it was a good movie. And, we love Larry Fessenden. I love Keith David too, but I don't know if I really needed to see more of him in this movie, since this one isn't nearly as quality as Good Boy. See, there's the difference, folks. Two very independent productions. One of them is different, innovative, enjoyable. The other one, a little bit of a been there, done that. We've seen it before, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, go back to Good Boy if you want to watch a really good independent horror film. Anyway, back to the subject at hand. Eventually, we start getting more about the background of Riley, and how when she was younger, she used to claim that she would see a monster outside of her bedroom window. The problem was her bedroom was on the second floor, so it would be an impossibility for someone to be standing outside of her bedroom window. But obviously, this isn't a standard, creep or whatever staring into people's windows. This apparently turns out to be something supernatural. Yes, there is something that's been following Riley pretty much since she was a child. And, Riley has been kind of, at various points in her life experiencing different occurrences with said entity. We don't really get to see the entity early on, so it basically just looks like a black shadow with glowing eyes. Not ultra glowing, like not bright, just kind of a dull glow, which we'll actually see more of as the movie goes along. So eventually, Mia starts confiding in her husband about everything that she's starting to put together. The fact that her and Riley had these experiences when they were younger. She even talks about how, Riley being the younger sister, Mia talks about how she never believed her sister, but then one night, just to kind of, prove to her that there are no monsters, she decided to sleep in Riley's bed with her. And that night, she experienced exactly what Riley had been talking about. She woke up in the middle of the night. She looks out the bedroom window, which again is on the second floor, and she sees a glowing-eyed entity staring back at her. And then the glass cracks. And that's kind of, it seems like every time this entity looks at someone through a window, the glass cracks. It happened with Wilson, because later in the film, we find out that Wilson also saw this entity when he was younger, and it would leave cracks in the glass of the window that the creature looked through. So, we're starting to see a pattern here. Eventually, like I said, Mia confides in her husband everything that she's believing is happening. And then the husband turns into that skeptical spouse, which, like I said, it's a trope that I can't fucking stand anymore. Folks, I am about to celebrate my 30th wedding anniversary with Mrs. Venom this coming March. And let me tell you something. If she tells me that she saw a demon in our bedroom window, I have no fucking reason not to believe her. Now, obviously, there's mental health things that potentially could also be a cause, but I'm not going to be that skeptical asshole that makes my wife feel like she's worthless or that she's stupid or whatever the case may be, just because the story she's telling doesn't fit into my version of reality. Do you understand, folks? As a spouse, it's for better or for worse. It's till death do we part. So I have no reason to not believe my wife if she were to tell me that our apartment was haunted. Because let me tell you something. If she tells me that, we move the next day. I'm not that horror movie husband who has to see the proof in person before I believe my wife. No, she tells me the place is haunted, we're out. And that's it. It's that simple. So again, we get the skeptical spouse here. And not only is he skeptical, he has the absolute balls to look at his wife and literally say the words, "You need help," before walking out on her. And, you know, which again, it's a trope that I can't stand. I wish Stuckman didn't do this, but I mean, because ultimately you don't even need the husband character. He does nothing in this movie other than be a skeptical douchebag. Like, he literally has no plot point whatsoever, no bearing on this story. I mean, you could have just made Mia a divorced character. Just say that she's divorced, and then that's one less person you got to pay. And, you know, we don't have to worry about the skeptical douchebag stuff that I can't stand. So anyway, after being told by the one person who's supposed to support her on this planet that she needs help, she decides to start her own investigation. So she goes to, that's when we see Keith David. She decides to go and talk to the former warden of the Shelby Oaks Penitentiary. And he starts to talk a little bit about how as soon as this Wilson guy got admitted into the prison, that shit just started hitting the fan. Riots started happening more often. People would end up dead mysteriously. Like, you know, they would have no understanding as to how this, you know, particular inmate was killed, who did it, things like that. So eventually Wilson was released from prison. You know, he served his time for whatever it was that he did. Like I said, I can't really remember exactly what he did, but yeah, he does eventually get out of prison. And then disappears for like, I don't know, like 20 years. Like literally no one sees him, no one. And that brings us up to the modern day, when finally he shows up at Mia's doorstep, blowing his own brains out. So, you know, kind of a decent groundwork for the mystery now. So eventually we do actually watch the tape that was in Wilson's hand. We see that Riley and her 3 cohorts are going to Shelby Oaks to do an investigation. And as soon as they hit the town, the city limits of the town, Riley is instantly just kind of set off. Like, she doesn't like the vibe of the town. She even suggests leaving before the sun goes down. And obviously her 3 cohorts are like, no, we're not going anywhere. This place is awesome. You know, they've got an abandoned amusement park to investigate. They've got an abandoned prison to investigate. And when they actually do go to the abandoned prison, Riley has a little bit of an experience when she looks into a certain prison cell. At this time, we don't know whose cell it is, but we see her look into this cell. Suddenly, we can see her breath, you know, like the temperature drop drastically. We can suddenly see the steam coming from her mouth. And she basically says, or actually, no, she doesn't say anything. She just decides to run. She just turns around and leaves, screaming. And basically that's the last we see of the prison in Riley's footage, excuse me. And then that evening, while they're investigating, you know, one of the abandoned houses in the town, they are attacked. And basically, you know, it's kind of up in the air whether it's a supernatural attack or if it's actually a group of people. Like maybe it's a cult. I started to think that this was turning into a cult movie, which it kind of does, actually. It's just a very small cult, but we'll get to that. And so after watching all the footage, and then after her husband basically calls her crazy, she decides to go to the prison on her own. And also she's been doing investigations about this demon that they supposedly, did they give the name of this demon in the movie? And I just forgot. I can't remember, but I do remember that she does look up information about an incubus. That's what it is. She looks up information about an incubus. And, we see information like, the incubus doesn't show itself right away. It might send some hellhounds, dogs that work for the demon that are kind of, almost like they're scoping out the potential victim and scoping out situations around the potential victim and things like that. So when Mia goes to the prison at night by herself, mind you, now, this is one of the decisions that a lot of other people, a lot of other reviewers have been kind of questioning. But personally, the fact that her husband literally just called her crazy and said that she needs help, it makes total sense to me that she would go on her own because she doesn't have a support system. She doesn't have anybody else to go with. And she obviously, while the thoughts rolling around her head are fresh, she wants to do her investigation. So she ends up going to the prison. While she's at the prison, she is eventually attacked by a dog with glowing eyes. Once again, very familiar glowing eyes that we've seen throughout the film. And just as the hound is about to attack her, we see a black hand come out of the darkness and stop the dog, basically, kind of making him heal, allowing Mia to escape the prison unharmed. Now, she continues her investigation, and then she finds out that she finds out by accident that there's still someone living in Shelby Oaks. Shelby Oaks looks like a total ghost town. According to all records, everyone has left and there's no one still there. But after she runs out of the prison, after the hellhound, and she does see the black arm reach from the darkness to stop the dog. So she does know that she's absolutely not alone. She ends up running away and accidentally finding an old woman who just happens to still be living in Shelby Oaks. The old woman invites her in. She starts talking to the old woman. And then the woman asks her, what are you up to? Why are you in this town? No one ever comes out here anymore, not since the amusement park closed, blah, blah, blah. That's when Mia lets her know that she's, looking for her missing sister. And, throughout the conversation that she's having with the old woman, she hears someone upstairs. Like she hears like the wood floor, like creaking, like there's someone upstairs walking around, and she asks, "Oh, do you live by yourself?" And she's like, "Oh, no, my son lives here with me." And then through the conversation, we find out that fucking Wilson is her son. Yes, this is the mother of the kind of the center of this story so far. This Wilson character who has all these evil things follow him wherever he goes. We find out that this is Wilson's mother, and that, she felt bad for him, and she felt bad that society didn't understand him, and blah blah blah. Basically the way any serial killer's mother would speak about them. They're misunderstood, they're not bad, blah blah blah. Eventually there's an altercation, and finally Mia just flat out says, "Where is my sister?" Like, she starts to realize that the woman knows more than she's letting on. So finally, the woman's like, "Okay, follow me." And the woman ends up taking her into a basement where, when we look down into the basement, we see a very familiar black figure standing right behind her. And, with the glowing eyes and everything, Mia sees this and says, "Nope," and just decides to take off. But then she hears movement upstairs. Now, she knows that Wilson is dead. She was there when he blew his own brains out. So she knows that's not Wilson up there. So she decides to go up to the roof up there to find out, who is that's moving around. Lo and behold, it's Riley. Yes, Riley is still alive. She has been held captive by Wilson and his mother, or at least up until Wilson, offed himself. And then you kind of start to think back to the statement that he made about, "Oh, she finally let me go. She finally set me free." What kind of hold did Wilson's mother have on him? Well, we find out that she has been working with said incubus that we've been seeing throughout the film. She's basically, what's happening is the incubus wants a human child. And the creature, the incubus, has been following Riley has been following Riley her entire life, because he has decided that she is the chosen one. She is the one that will give birth to his son, or to his child, if you will. And as it turns out, during the 12 years that Riley was there, she was repeatedly raped by the incubus, trying to get her pregnant. And finally, she did get pregnant, and very recently had a child, like literally right before her sister Mia found her. Riley had a child, and this was now the new son of the incubus. Basically, in a lot of the text that Mia found online, she saw that the child of an incubus would basically be like the Antichrist, very, very much Damien Thorne in The Omen, if you will. I kind of saw similarities to that. I think most people would. So like I said, and then we get yet another reveal that the baby is still alive. Yes, the baby is alive and well, thriving in another room of the house. Now, obviously, when Mia is trying to get Riley out of the house, Mia doesn't want to leave the child there. So Mia, not Riley, not the mother of the child, but Mia decides to take the child with them during their escape. And the escape is only made possible because Wilson's mother performs a ritual in the basement while Mia is there, and she actually slits her wrist the correct way, up and down, not side to side, pouring her own blood on what looks like an altar of some kind. And then as that scene progresses, we see Wilson's mother get weaker and weaker until finally she dies from blood loss. And that's when Riley, Mia, and the child are able to escape. So at this point, we're back home. We're back at Mia's house. Everybody is shocked that Riley is still alive. And mind you, Riley being a paranormal investigator on YouTube, there were a lot of naysayers who were saying, oh, she's not missing. She's just, she's doing this for publicity. But obviously, at this point, she's been missing for 12 years. So I don't think that's much of a publicity stunt. So with Riley and the baby back home at Mia's house, we get our final scene of the film, which is the same documentary film crew that started the movie is back at Mia's house, once again interviewing her. But obviously, circumstances are much happier this time because now Riley is home. And not only that, but Mia and her husband were having trouble having children. They don't really say in the movie which one of them was incapable of having a child, but one of them obviously was unable to. So Mia is obviously glowing because not only does she have her sister back, she has a baby in the house that she gets to take care of, because obviously Riley has just been a sexual captive for 12 years. So she's obviously in no condition to take care of the child. So that night, we see Riley get up out of bed and take her pillow and walk up to the child like she's going to smother the child. Then it looks almost like she's changing, like she's going to change her mind and she's going to just turn around and go back to bed. But then she basically has a change of heart again and decides, nah, I have to do this. This child has to die. At the exact moment that Riley is putting the pillow over the baby's face to smother it, Mia walks in and basically tries to stop her. Now, Mia thinks that Riley wants to kill the baby because of the circumstances of its birth. At this point, Mia doesn't really understand that it's the incubus that raped Riley and got her pregnant. Mia thinks that it was Wilson, that Wilson was the one that was raping her, and blah blah blah, which potentially could be the case. Maybe Wilson was a vessel for the incubus. We're not sure. But take it with a grain of salt. Either the incubus itself was raping Riley, or Wilson, while being possessed by the incubus, was raping Riley. So regardless, Riley basically says the baby has to die. There's an altercation. Riley and Mia have a little bit of a wrestling match. And then Mia, in her attempt to rip the pillow away from Riley's hands, ends up pushing Riley out the window. And yes, of course, it is a second-story window. She falls down to the ground. She does not die. She's injured, but she does not die. Mia is basically calling out to her from the second floor window that is now broken because Riley just went crashing through it. And at the exact moment that we see Riley start to get up, we see 3 hellhounds come out of the darkness and just tear her apart. They're biting chunks of flesh off of her. They're biting her hair off. I think one of them might have partially scalped her. They're just literally decimating her until she's finally just deader than dead. Mia is standing up at the broken window, looking down at her dead sister. And then we see the familiar dark figure behind her. Yes, we see the incubus behind her. Then we see the incubus put its hand on Mia's shoulder, and then her eyes start to glow. That very familiar glow that we've seen from Wilson, his mother, the hellhounds, just anybody who had anything to do with the incubus has these glowing eyes. And like I said, as soon as the incubus puts the hand on Mia's shoulder, her eyes start to glow, and we see her smile like she is now going to take over raising the incubus's child. So now she has become the chosen one, and she will be the mother of the Antichrist. And that's pretty much it. Our movie fades to black, and that's it. Our movie is over. Like I said, folks, a lot have been there, done that. We've seen incubus and succubus stories in the past done much better. We've seen demonic possession stories, again, done much better. We've seen cult movies done much better. Like I said, if this is a cult, it's a 2-person cult. It's just Wilson and his mother. But maybe there are others that, also worship the incubus that we just don't see in the movie. That's one of the complaints I have about the movie is the world building. I don't think the world building is very good in this movie. Like, obviously, the world of this movie is Shelby Oaks. And with Shelby Oaks basically being a ghost town, there's just not really a lot there. We don't get a lot of horror set pieces. We get the cool scene at the prison. We get a couple of shots throughout the film of the incubus kind of standing in the background. We see his dark silhouette standing at various places. We see glowing eyes throughout the film. Sometimes they're actually attached to a person. Sometimes they're just kind of free floating in the darkness. We just see the glowing eyes. So, there is some, enjoyable aspects of this film. But like I said, after the first act of this got me, kind of ready and peaked, my interest was peaked and I was ready for the rest of the film. Then the second act comes in and just kind of ruins all the goodwill that the first act made for the film. So like I said, overall, it's an okay film. Like I struggle to even call it good. I will say that the technical aspects, we've already talked about that. The movie looks great. It sounds great. It's fairly well acted. There is some questionable acting throughout, but at least our main star, Mia, again, played by Camille Sullivan, she's definitely drives the narrative of this movie. Did the movie need a narrative? I don't think it did. I was very happy with it being a found footage kind of mockumentary style film, but Stuckman wanted to kind of spread his wings out a little bit and try to play around with, more than one subgenre in one film. Joko Arnoir, you are not. At least not yet, my friend, but maybe you'll get there someday. So Yeah, like I said, a little underwhelming. Hopefully, the next one, if there is a next one, will be a little bit more exciting, a little bit more enjoyable. But yeah, that's it for me. So I'll send it back to Mike or Don, whoever would like to speak.
Okay, so the demon entity thing, was it originally going after Riley and then switched to Mia?
No, it was never going after Mia. It was always going after Riley. Don't forget, the reason that it switched to Mia is because Riley tried to kill the child. That's why he sent the Hellhounds to kill Riley. Like Riley was always the chosen one, always the mother of this child. But then obviously, once Riley tries to kill the child, the incubus isn't just going to allow her to have another opportunity to do it. So that's why he killed her. And then he basically takes Mia as his new, whatever you want to, I don't want to say bride, but at least the new mother of his child. And she seems to accept it willingly. Like I said, she gives off that smile there at the end of the movie after her eyes start to glow. So yeah,
Okay,
I think Riley was always the target. Yep.
Okay, so I guess this particular demon can just, it can, I guess, take you over like unwillingly. Like
Yeah, it seems that way. Yeah.
yeah, because I think that goes along the lines of like when you were talking about the world building, we don't know exactly how it works because usually,
Yep.
I can understand the kidnapping the girl to get impregnated because that's usually always like against the will of the person,
Exactly.
like, but the kind of taking over as like the new caretaker or watcher or whatever you would consider it, usually that's has something to do with like the larger cult of like I'm voluntarily joining this cult to like be this thing,
Yeah.
but we don't get enough world building or background to know.
Yeah.
So I guess we're just assuming that it can just assign it to whoever it wants.
Well, I think because Camille has wanted a child, her whole adult life and wasn't able to have one with her husband, I think that's probably why she's willing to take this child. She understands it is the child of an incubus and will more than likely destroy the world later on down the line. But
Yeah, well,
I'm pretty sure Mia Farrow had that same realization at the end of Rosemary's Baby when she made the
yeah,
decision to keep her baby.
yeah. And I just assumed that like she was kind of taken over by whatever powers or spell because her eyes glowed
Yeah.
at the end. So
Exactly. Like I don't think that there was really I don't think the needed to do too much to get her to keep the child after Riley fell out the window. But touching her and actually partially possessing her, I think that's just his way of controlling her to make sure that she makes all the right decisions with the child moving forward.
yeah,
Yeah, that's my theory.
good enough for me. All right. So I guess that's going to wrap up our thoughts on Shelby Oaks. Venom, do you have anything new?
Yes, finally, I can finally say that officially No More Room in Hell presents Creature Comforts. Episode 43 is now available. It should be available on all your podcast catchers and on YouTube. On episode 43, we took a look at our October pick for the month, which since the first October that we did Creature Comforts, we did the original Wolfman. Derek decided that for this October episode, we would do kind of the sentimental sequel to the Wolfman, and that, of course, is Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, of course, with the returning Lon Chaney as the Wolfman, and an interesting performance by Bela Lugosi as the Frankenstein monster. Derek actually does educate us a little bit as to why that performance is a little, I don't know, sleepy, I guess might be the one way to put it. But yeah, ends up being a really fun episode and a pretty good movie. So yeah, if you have access to Peacock, it is available on Peacock currently. That's coming to us from 1943. That is Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman on the latest episode of Creature Comforts. And unfortunately, that's all I got for you. We do have one thing to talk about with the main show, but I'll leave that one for Mike. So that's it for me.
All right, Don, how about you?
Been injured, nothing for me.
All right. As Venom was alluding to, the main show put out our annual Halloween commentary, and wouldn't you know, we went with a movie that we just recently covered on Fresh Cuts and enjoyed, VHS Halloween. So, if you want a double dose of that, or even if you're watching it for the first time, throw on the commentary with it. And this episode should be out. Well, I guess highest highest probability on Halloween, but if not, within a couple days of it.
Yep.
So maybe you can catch it on your work day while you count down until the actual Halloween festivities can begin. So
And it actually makes me happy to say that a lot of our commentaries tend to kind of devolve into us just having random conversations about whatever. I gotta say, this commentary, I feel like, and maybe that's because of the quality of the film, it's the one where we actually concentrated on the film the most. So this is, I feel like this is one of our first true commentaries where we're actually talking about the segments, the things we like about them, the things we don't like about them. So yeah, definitely one worth checking out. So enjoy.
all right. Is there anything? Well, Frankenstein opens wide,
Yeah.
but that's also coming. It also hits Netflix, I think, in a week. So, like, if we had to save it for something else, because I know Hell House prequel, I think, is on Shutter right now.
Ugh.
I haven't seen it yet
Yeah.
though, but
I've heard bad things. Don
Trust me, they're
obviously just
worse. They're worse. That film is absolute ass.
yeah, well, I mean, obviously, I'm going to watch it regardless, but whether we talk about it here or not, we'll have to see. There is that double feature playing at AMC theaters on Halloween night. Harrow Road and Vincent Must Die. I know nothing about either of those films. I just know that it's a one night event double feature with both of those movies. I think it's an AMC exclusive because I don't see it playing at like Regal or Century or Cinemark or any of the other ones. So if you have an AMC near you and you don't already have plans for Halloween night, because that's the big one, because I already have plans. So I unfortunately am not going to get a chance to see it either of those movies until they hit VOD, because I actually for once have legitimate Halloween night plans. So as far as what's on the docket for fresh cuts, I don't know. I mean, if Hell House is so bad that I can't even finish it, then we'll have to pick something else. But not to say that we're picking that, not by any stretch. But
yeah.
I'm sure there's something on VOD we can pick up on.
I'm gonna try to see Frankenstein this weekend. Now, if there was only
Yeah,
one movie coming out, it would definitely be that. But the problem is Yorgos' new movie Begonia comes out, and that's like my number one priority. Especially if we're not even gonna do Frankenstein for fresh cuts, then I'll still probably try to see both because I ideally I would see both, but
I mean, for those who don't know, Guillermo del Toro is my favorite director, bar none. I absolutely love the man, so I'm always down to talk about his films. It's a Frank. I mean, we just did Frankenstein meets the Wolfman on Creature Comforts. It would make sense to do Frankenstein as our kind of end of October, beginning of November episode. Since we're a little late with this episode, technically we're 3 days late because of my work schedule. Again, I apologize. But I would lean Frankenstein, obviously.
yep, okay. Well, we have options, so we'll get it figured out within the next handful of days and be back with another episode of Fresh Cuts. And I think if all goes well, we'll be recording the main show Sunday, correct?
Oh, that's the plan. Yep.
Number 71. Cool. Okay. Well, with that said, thank you everybody for listening to the latest episode of Fresh Cuts. Let's say bye to the listeners.
Later.
Incubus, succubus, whatever. It's all the same. Though I will say Incubus makes a better band.
Peace.
Shut up, Don.